Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your Ultimate Lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code Stardust to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and whenever I'm in this part of the galaxy, I listen to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Makes flying a little more tolerable. Don't tell Anakin.
Excelsior, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
This episode will feature a discussion of the Phantom Menace 25th Anniversary Special #1 comic from Marvel. But before we dive into the pages of the comic, Jay, remind everybody where we can be found around the internet.
Absolutely. We are very easily found on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust.
All right, this is the line. The signal is boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So as I just said, we're going to be talking about a one-shot comic, which is the Phantom Menace 25th Anniversary Special #1. This was written by Greg Pak, who's been the author on the current Darth Vader series. We got art by Will Sliney. The color artist is Guru EFX. Letter is VC's Joe Caramanga, who does most of Star Wars comics. And we get an outstanding cover by Phil Noto. So, Jay, I guess I would describe this as not so much a retelling of the Phantom Menace, but as it's not even a side story, but it is an adjacent telling of the Phantom Menace, and where it focuses on Anakin, includes a few details that we didn't see in the movie, gives a bit more from his perspective, and a little bit more about Shmi as well. What do you think? How would you describe it?
I think that's absolutely perfect. And that is exactly what my initial reaction was like, oh, okay, this is cool. We get to see some of the things that we've only heard about from Anakin's point of view.
Mhm.
And like you said, just a few other extra things as well. But I just appreciate the fact that we're getting this for the 25th anniversary, which I think is just mainly the point.
Right. When I first heard about this and not having known any details about it, I just assumed they were doing a new comic adaptation of the movie.
Mhm.
And this is not an adaptation. I mean, it is, yeah, as we kind of talked about earlier in other places, that E.K. Johnston wrote a book about Padme,
Right.
Queen Amidala, and it was it very much like talked around the movie, and it gave us like the barest glimpse of things that we saw actually happen in the movie, and then talked about what handmaidens were doing in some places and some of Amidala's thoughts in other places, and it gave us extra scenes. This is very similar to that. I have to say, I think I preferred this comic to that book, but we don't need to debate that here. This all starts off with young Anakin before the Phantom Menace is having a dream where he comes back to Tatooine as a Jedi and saves his mother and some other people who are still slaves from being sent to the Zygerian work colonies.
Yeah.
And then he wakes up and tells his mother about the dream. And what did you think about that little sequence there?
Well, I was actually thrown off just a little bit because I was looking at Shmi and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, like they've really drawn her ancient looking. And then I realized that, oh, okay, this is why.
Mhm.
But I thought it was a nice touch that they were showing what was going on with that. And this was all part of Anakin's dream of that he was going to go back and, he was having these visions and wanting to free his mom in the end.
Right. Yeah, and I think as you're suggesting there, it alludes right to that scene right in the Phantom Menace where
Right.
when Qui-Gon tells Anakin, you're no longer a slave, you've been freed, and then he kind of turns to his mom for permission, and she says, this choice has been put before you, and the response is, "This is what I always wanted. It's always dreamed of." Well, here's the dream that we
There's
get
the
right
dream.
there. And what did you think about the appearance of Anakin as a Jedi? Like, it's like before he even knew what a Jedi looked like.
Right. No, I think he did a good job in his dream,
Hmm.
honestly. And what was really cool was the yellow lightsaber that looked
Hmm.
very much like a sword.
Hmm.
And, because you hear Anakin talking about a laser sword. And so I just think that this is from a little boy's perspective, like you said, for somebody that never actually seen a Jedi before and only never heard of them, is that this was the vision that he was able to see.
Hmm. Right. Indeed. Yeah, I liked it as well. This all gets interrupted by a droid that wanders in and is like, clearly works for Watto, and is like, "Anakin, what in the world are you still doing here? Get to work." And you're supposed to go to a spaceport and pick up a shipment. And the droid like lords it over him that, "Yeah, you got that transmitter in you, so don't think about any funny business or we'll track you down and blow you up." I was like, dang, that droid was cruel. I mean, in a
Yeah.
way that Watto never was that we saw.
Well, I think that that was also where, it was basically bored into Anakin's head that, and you'll go boom, it's kind of where he repeated in the actual movie itself. They will blow you up, you know?
Hmm.
So that's where it
Right. No,
comes
I
from.
agree with that as well. And that one I thought was a bit on the money for it being said, but fine, I can overlook that. The story picks him up then, and this is a scene I really like. He's in Mos Eisley. He's picking up the shipment, and whoever is delivered to is like, "Hey, tell Watto he owes me money." And Anakin's like, "Yeah, yeah." you know, we know Anakin hangs
And
out at
here
the
we go
sports
again.
part because he tells Padme about that in the movie. He hears these things from the pilots there, about the angels of Iago and things like that. And but while he's there are some slavers that we kind of saw featured in his dream that have shown up with a Tusken in tow, and they're going to try and sell this Tusken into slavery, which seems like a colossally bad idea to me.
Yeah.
But Anakin creates a diversion by hot wiring the speeder so it takes off on its own, and in the confusion, he frees the Tusken. So we all know that Anakin helps without any thought of reward, and he knows nothing of greed. What do you think about this little rescue scene?
Well, I think, it's a looking forward to the future and how ironic that he's freeing a Tuscan.
Mhm.
And the Tuscans are who end up enslaving his mom, and then, as we know, he slaughters the whole village.
Okay. I know you've been reading the novelization for the Phantom Menace while we've been
Mhm.
doing our series on it, but there's a scene in there where he frees a trapped Tusken from like under
Yes.
a boulder or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, is this another Tusken or is this in place of that Tusken?
I think
uh,
it's another one
yeah,
because, yeah, it was under a different context.
right. Yeah. Well, I'm just like, basically what I'm asking is that no longer part of our canon? And this is, it doesn't really matter, but this is not the last we'll see of this Tusken. But I did like that scene. It's a questionable move to take a Tuscan prisoner like this. Our understanding of what the Tuscans are have changed since this movie came out in theaters, based on what we've seen of them in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. But they're not people really to be trifled with like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. So Anakin goes back home. There's a brief goodnight scene where his mom asks him if he stayed out of trouble. And he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, no trouble, mom." Even though he was helping a Tuscan escape from slavery. We get to see kind of it would be a montage if this was animated or a live action thing with Anakin meeting Padme and Qui-Gon, entering the pod race and winning. These are all scenes that we see in the movie, and that it's featured, or sorry, followed up by a scene where Qui-Gon is talking to Anakin about helping people, and it won't always be easy. And they kind of make the joke, okay, not that the pod race was easy, but it takes dedication. It can be difficult, the like, and this reminds me of that little tone poem type preview that they had for the Phantom Menace in the back in the day, where it was the one with Qui-Gon is like, it's a hard life. It won't be easy, but at the end of the day, you'll learn who you are. At least that's the vibe I got from it. But how about you?
Mhm, no, exactly, and I think that that was one of the things that, for Anakin, he looked forward to being a Jedi because it was something that he could do to serve, and they're
Mhm.
setting it up that that's what he does, is that he serves people.
Right. And then once again, we get this notion that, he realizes he's talking about being a Jedi. Anakin realizes Qui-Gon's talking about being a Jedi, and it's what he's always wanted. So he
Right.
leaves with Qui-Gon. They meet with the Jedi Council, or Anakin does, and we get brief shots of that. Again, all these scenes that we've seen in the movie, but they don't dwell on them, which is smart. They
Yes,
ground
I
us
agree.
they ground us with where we are in the movie by giving us the familiar, the thing that we've seen a couple hundred times, as Star Wars fans we are, and watch these movies so frequently. But then they get us back to the new stuff, and we get this really interesting conversation with Jar Jar. Qui-Gon just gets done telling or Anakin tells Jar Jar, "Well, Qui-Gon's not allowed to train me yet," and then there's this notion of Anakin being a bit scared, and Jar Jar talks about everyone being scared sometimes, and but that people worry about themselves, they worry about their people, they worry about their friends. It's a sign of a good heart, and he says,
Yeah.
Anakin, you have a good heart, which I really wish this had been included in the movie.
I agree. Yes, I was thinking the same thing because this is so touching,
Hmm.
and it really shows that Jar Jar understands that, this he's being very human, even though he's
Hmm.
Gungan, but and he even points to his heart, and Yusa got one. I just thought that
Hmm.
was so sweet.
Well, you pair this with later in the Phantom Menace, where Jar Jar's talking to Queen Amidala, and he was afraid that people are going to die, and then he says like the Gungans get pasted too, and Amidala's like, yeah, I hope not. And then Jar Jar's like, I don't think so, we have a grand army, we warriors and stuff like that. And maybe that's me thinks that's why you not like us so much. There is wisdom behind Jar Jar that's buried deep under all the goofiness that we
Mhm.
see. And
Yeah.
this inclusion of this scene in the movie, and I don't know if this was something that they pulled off the cutting room floor or if Greg Pak wrote this one himself. But something like this would have gone so far to improving Jar Jar's image.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and I wonder if it was one of, like you said, the cutting room floor, if it was actually a deleted scene.
Hmm.
And I need to pull out my DVDs and see if it's actually on there, because I
Yeah,
don't
I don't
remember
have
if
any
it is.
memory of anything like this, and I've
I don't
seen the
either.
deleted scene. So, if it was, it never made it into the bonus features on a DVD or Blu-ray and or elsewhere. I can't remember this in the novelization or anything else. So I don't know. This just it seems new, but I loved it. It was, I think, one of the best parts of this comic.
Mhm. No, I totally agree.
Okay. So we get kind of an expansion of a scene from the movie where Anakin overhears Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon arguing about him. Obi-Wan's telling Qui-Gon that, the boy's dangerous. They all see it. Why can't you? And Qui-Gon's like, it's good enough for me. Get on board. And then we are familiar with the scene where Anakin talks to Qui-Gon about, midi-chlorians and I don't want to be a problem. But we get a later scene where it's like, he asks Qui-Gon if he's dangerous. And this is where Qui-Gon talks about, people with their skills have higher standards. They have to learn to control their emotions, and that is why he needs training here. So, did these panels in the comic enhance anything for you? Did you find it redundant, or what are your thoughts?
No, I really think that it did enhance it because it showed that Qui-Gon just took a little bit of extra time to allow Anakin to understand that he is different, that he does have these abilities, that he's setting the bar to where Anakin needs to understand that there are certain types of standards that you're going to need to be able to follow,
Hmm.
and but also reassuring him that no, you're not dangerous, you're just special. And, because as a young boy, and especially a young boy that knows nothing beyond his own personal experiences as a slave on Tatooine, he doesn't know what to expect. He doesn't know truly. I mean, he's heard of Jedi, but he's never really understood what it truly means to be one. And so when someone tells him that he's dangerous or that it is dangerous, that's the first thing he's going to internalize. So I did appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, except I think there could have been a couple other panels and more of this discussion that would have made it like a home run. I think it just missed the mark. for me. And the reason being is that I get where they're going with this, is that Anakin learns by eavesdropping that Obi-Wan says, like, the boy's dangerous. The council believes it. That's why they're not allowing you to train him. And Qui-Gon is breaking it down for him, what it is that they're talking about, and that we have to control our emotions. But he doesn't explain why, really, in this case.
True.
That the whole fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering, I think goes right over Anakin's head in the moment when he's in the Jedi Council scene. And this is where it's not bad, but it's not as great as it could be. Qui-Gon could really explain that, that with the powers we have, it's easy to use them to respond to these type of things. And I'm not even doing a great job, but I'm not a writer. I didn't write the comic. That this is the danger and this is what they're afraid of. And others that have had our abilities that weren't able to control their emotions caused great suffering on the galaxy. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're afraid of. And so, and even like a warning of that, even though Qui-Gon dies, might have gone a long way in the grand scheme of things.
That's true. Yep. No, those are all good points.
Right. So we get a number of other scenes in another montage here with Gungans fighting droids, the Queen invading the palace, the Jedi fighting Darth Maul, the N1 fighters that take on the blockade, and Anakin destroys the battleship, and we see Qui-Gon dying in battle. It's almost heartbreaking after that after the Separatist battleship is destroyed, Anakin's talking about going to Naboo and telling Qui-Gon about it. But then when he gets there, he finds Obi-Wan waiting from the hangar, and he instantly knows that Qui-Gon died in the fight.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I like the way that they set it up where they were sort of mirroring what Anakin was doing with what was going on with Qui-Gon's death, which is, even though we knew that all of that was happening concurrently in the movie at the time when we were watching it, it just hit a little bit different, especially that panel when, just before Qui-Gon is passing away and Obi-Wan is cradling him. And then you see that slight little thing in the panel about, wanting to tell Qui-Gon about it. And then now it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. And okay, so what do you think about this? Is like, we get this extra scene here where, in the movie, it's during the funeral pyre where our Anakin says to Obi-Wan, it's like, what'll happen to me now? And then he says, the council has given me permission to train you. I promise you, you will be a Jedi. But this comes before that. And he says to Anakin, Qui-Gon's last wish was that for me to train you as a Jedi, and he's going to keep his promise to do so. I like the sentiment, but it seems a bit redundant with what we've got in the movie. What do you think?
No, I agree. And it was nice to see him interacting solely with Anakin at that point. But yeah, it didn't absolutely need to be in there. But I mean, it is what it is. I don't know. And the way that Obi-Wan looked was a little bit, I don't know, it was different. It didn't really resonate the same way that I thought like Ewan McGregor looked. Like all the other characters, they were great, but I don't know. And that's just a me thing.
That just happens sometimes with Will Sliney's art. He's a great artist, but every once in a while you get a panel. But that happens with all the artists. There's sometimes they just don't quite nail the look. The other thing about here is just kind of like, as good a job as Obi-Wan does on a regular basis, like talking to people and explaining things to people, this really came off of like, the only reason I'm training you, Anakin, is I made a promise. Not that I really believe in your abilities or that, you are the chosen one here, but my dead master made me promise and I'm going to live up to that promise. So, okay. Well, then the Chancellor arrives. We get we'll watch your career with great interest. We get the other Jedi arriving. Anakin is thinking of his mother. We get to see a number of red panels and we get a very dark adult looking Anakin who's returned to Tatooine to free Shmi. We get to see him say, "You're free." And then, this all ends up at Obi-Wan saying, Qui-Gon believed in you and so do I. So it kind of mitigates what I was talking about earlier. But what do you think about these kind of like visions of the future where we get like a dark side adult Anakin coming back to free Shmi?
Yeah, I mean, that should be if it's something that Anakin actually did have as a vision, you would
Mhm.
think that that would be more of a cautionary sort of thing for him because it's obvious with the red background and everything that it was a lot more dark side, like you said, than anything else.
Yeah. Well, and the other part of it is that this is exactly what the Jedi Council was afraid of.
Right.
You know, s
Mhm.
your thoughts dwell on your mother. What's that got to do with anything? Everything, you know fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate. I've already said that this episode here, and this is exactly what they were talking about, and he doesn't see it, but why should he? He's a kid
Mhm.
in there, and
Exactly.
we've had this conversation a number of times on the podcast where the kids in Star Wars, they're all special. They're
Right.
all on an elevated levels compared to, um, what we're used to in this case. But he wouldn't understand this vision, but apparently he doesn't tell it to anybody else either. So
Right.
I mean, if he thought it was something courageous, you would think he'd be excited about that as a kid, but not so much.
Right. Exactly.
All right. Well, then we get one last final scene. We're back on Tatooine. We got Shmi talking to Jira, who is the elderly woman that's working, selling the fruit or whatever it is in the streets of Mos Espa. And basically, the question comes up, oh, you must miss him, but Anakin is in a better place. 3PO consoles Shmi back at the homestead. And then the Tusken that Anakin helped back at the beginning of the story arrives. And through 3PO, who translates, tells the story about how Anakin helped him and brought back one of those pods that we got to see in the Book of Boba Fett that has the
Yeah.
juice or water in it, which was a nice touch. And so we did hear about how Anakin was able to help free a slave, so to speak, and all that. And so, you know, the whole thing concludes with Shmi saying, "Anakin had a dream, and I had one too. I dreamed he was a Jedi," and that is our conclusion there. So, what do you think about the wrap up here of this issue?
Oh, just ironic. And I think that that was intentional because of the fact that we know what happens with the Tuscans. But I do think it was a nice tie, as you said, with the Black Melon in the callback or call forward, if you will, to the Book of Boba Fett. So I thought that was
Hmm.
a really nice touch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I liked it too, and it's what I think really drove home everything here. We get to see a vision after this of Obi-Wan and Anakin together, which is what we're used to, which was cool. So, that was great. I like this idea that, Shmi's dream was that Anakin go on to do something. It ties in very well to the story. It's like, this passing step for you. My place is here. He can make your dreams come true, that type of thing. And yeah, he was meant for something greater, and now he's got that opportunity, even
Hmm.
though it goes horribly awry.
Right.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, that's it. It's a nice, tidy story. I think it's a good supplement to the movie as well. I like it. I would love to get more of these, like from a different, like this perspective that focusing on different characters. One about Padme, one about Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and the like, and things that go around there. But it's just a one shot, so
Hmm.
we'll live with that. But it was definitely worth the read.
Yeah, for sure. And I was hoping that this was going to be a series. And
Hmm.
so they're not going to do, I mean, this is just the very, very beginning, really. I mean,
Hmm.
overall. But yeah, I would like to see more.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll do something like this for Revenge of the Sith next year. So we'll
Yeah,
check
for
that out then.
sure.
Okay, well then, that'll do it for our discussion of the Phantom Menace 25th Anniversary Special number 1 from Marvel. And thank you for all for joining us for the discussion. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that subscribe button for Podcast Stardust on your podcast of choice if you haven't already done so. You'll get all of our future discussions. We do cover comics fairly frequently, especially when it comes to High Republic and some other stuff, and we like to revisit some old favorites as well. I also like to remind you can find our entire catalog of shows over on richazap.com, which is home to a bunch of other great podcasts covering everything from the MCU and DC, Dune, Star Trek, and other great pop culture topics. We are super appreciative of your 5-star ratings and reviews on whatever podcatcher that you use to support such things. And we are greatly appreciative of when you share the show and your favorite episodes on social media with your friends. So, with that in mind, Jay, remind everybody where we can be found online one more time.
Absolutely. We can be very easily found on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust. And you can always connect with us as well on our many streaming platforms such as Spotify and the YouTubes, both of them, regular YouTube as well as YouTube Music. And we also have our Discord room on the RetroZap Discord server where you can hit us up in real time and let us know what you thought about this comic. And we also have a TeePublic store where you can pick up one of 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of goods, from home goods to apparel and pretty much everything in between. And if you are in need of a lightsaber or a laser sword, as Anakin calls it, you can head over to sabermasters.com and you can pick up either their lightsaber 2.0 or any one of their other amazing battle ready lightsabers. So, again, if you go to sabermasters.com and you do happen to pick something up, make sure that you put in the code Stardust at checkout. And that also helps to support the show. So if you're interested in that, the link to that will be in our show notes. So with that, Dennis, why don't you fill everybody in on what other kind of projects you have going on right now?
So my wife and I are talking about Star Trek over on Warp Trails, and we are currently finishing up our coverage of the 5th and final season of Star Trek Discovery. But we've talked about previous seasons of Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, and Strange New Worlds. The best place to find those is at retrozap.com. The podcast does come out when the episodes are fresh on the RetroZap podcast feed, but it doesn't have its own feed. So again, if you want to check out past episodes, go to retrozap.com. Otherwise, look for the new stuff over on the RetroZap podcast feed. So Jay, what do you got going on in cosplay?
Well, in cosplay, you can always catch me on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And right now, I'm taking a little bit of a hiatus from doing a lot of posting, but you can still catch all of my stuff as Hera, Ahsoka, the Fourth Sister, and my original concept Mandalorian. And I will also be in Medina, Ohio on June 1st for the Medina County Toy and Collectibles Fair. And so I'll be there for a very limited amount of time. I've got some other obligations that day, but you can also check out Vanessa Marshall, who will also be there. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm really looking forward to that.
All right. Upcoming on the show, Wednesday features the next installment of our The Phantom Menace series. And of course, that's the series where we divide the movie up into 10 to 15 minute segments and talk about one each month. And this will be segment 5, which is the lead up to the pod race. It's a lot of fun. So make sure you check that out. Then on Friday, we are going to be doing some special episodes. I'm about to go on vacation, and we recorded a bunch of episodes in advance with some past guests and some other things. So we're not going to necessarily be topical with what's going on in Star Wars news and the Acolyte and like for a few weeks, but we'll catch up on all that. But make sure you check out our movie discussion on Friday. So thanks for listening to episode 734, Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time, may the Force